For as long as I can remember, I've been a builder. I grew up on Lego Technic sets, spending hours clicking gears together and watching the suspension move exactly the way the manual promised it would. There was something incredibly satisfying about following that step-by-step logic, but looking back, I wasn't really the one doing the engineering. If the book said to put a peg in a beam, that's what I did. I was a really good manual follower, relying on someone else's math and someone else's design. This year in life design, I wanted to try and build something without the manual. I wanted to see if I could go from a childhood interest in how things move to actually having the skills to build a fully functional machine from scratch. I wasn't looking for a kit where the hard parts were already solved for me. I wanted to take a dive into the mechanical design, the electrical wiring, and the real world debugging that happens when your ideas don't work out on the table. Last year in STEM, I built a remote control tank, and I wanted to use that as a springboard to making the remote control car. For the tank, my main focus was mostly on the coding aspect, but this year I wanted to take an idea out of my head, put it onto CAD, and then turn it into a physical machine. I wanted to find out if I could handle the problems of a real project, the kind where you get stuck and there isn't an instruction book to give you the answers. I improved my ability to assess and analyze information. Basically, just figuring out what matters and what I can use. When I first took the car apart, I measured everything with calipers to get exact dimensions. Then I used those measurements to rebuild the parts in CAD. When I started putting it back together, I had to drill holes into the plastic to screw everything into the frame and connect the suspension. That's where it really showed. If even one measurement was off, it caused problems later. I ran into a bunch of issues. The steering linkage ended up too low, the suspension arms were too long, and I also forgot to design mounting points for the motor. So I ended up just gluing it on, which wasn't a great idea. That kind of made the whole thing sloppy and not very modular, since I can't easily take parts off or swap anything out. This is the rear control arm. It holds the knuckle in place. This is the rear knuckle. It holds the wheel in place and allows the suspension arms to articulate up and down. This is the front control arm. It allows the knuckle to rotate and steer. This is the front knuckle. It rotates, which allows it to steer. This is the frame. It allows me to mount all of my suspension onto it. This is the shock tower. It allows me to mount the shocks onto the frame. I learned that my time management wasn't great. The project was honestly bigger than I thought it was, and I really didn't account for that. I waited too long to start, and then I tried to fit everything in at the end. That's a big reason why a lot of things went wrong in the project. I didn't give myself enough time to plan or test anything that I did. I was just trying to get it done. Looking back, I think what I was trying to do was too much for the amount of time I was given. As I reflected on my year, I realized that I needed to invest myself more into the project and class. If I want to be an engineer, I need to be able to communicate my results to others. It may have been that I picked too difficult or complex of a task, but in all, I should have spent more time working on the project and putting more effort into what I was doing. The car is honestly kind of a mess. There are wrong parts, unfinished stuff, and a bunch of things that just didn't work. But most important of this project was going back and actually looking at that mess. That's where I learned the most. I had to go into my CAD and figure out why things failed, not just accept that they did. I basically had to debug my own thinking. I also had to admit that skills don't really matter if I don't actually use them right. I waited too long to start, rushed everything, and it showed. One of the hardest parts was just sitting there with a failed print and knowing it was my fault. Not getting mad and just quitting, but actually figuring out what went wrong. Now, when I look at my first design, I can see exactly what's wrong. Control arms are too long and the geometry's off. It's obvious now, and I think that's the biggest change. I actually understand what went wrong. I'm not going to pretend I've completely fixed everything. I still procrastinate. That didn't magically go away. But I do think my mindset has changed a bit. I don't see this as something where you just finish and you're done. It's more like something you keep working at. Even though the car isn't finished, I'm still working toward being an engineer. I'm starting to take responsibility for my own decisions instead of just following directions. The project wasn't really about ending with something perfect. It was more about figuring out how I actually work. And I'm still figuring that out. But I know if I keep working through the frustration instead of avoiding it, I'll get there eventually.